This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Ann Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Ann Pratt. I'm formerly from South Africa, and I relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative Fellowship in beautiful Boston in the United States of America. Today, our thoughtful bold leader joins us from the southern tip of the African continent in one of the world's best spirited cities in Cape Town, South Africa. She empowered herself through education. She uplifted herself from a poverty-stricken drug lord area in the Cape Flats in Cape Town, all the way to Harvard University to get a doctorate in education. Her personal best-selling autobiography, Swimming Upstream, chronicles her personal and professional journey from teacher to university professor to high-powered executive looking after human capital and board member of multiple Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed boards, a nonprofit, academic advisory boards, and a board chair. She is a multiple award-winning businesswoman and has completed 9 half marathons. Stay with us as she shares more about her personal and professional story, swimming upstream and rugged resilience, a fatal car crash, and losing her only child, Jamie, and why Mandela's leadership is unfinished business and matters today more than ever. Her message and compelling insights on rugged resilience is a personal gift not only to you, but to me too. Many of you know I'm on a cancer cure plan for stage 3 stomach cancer. And in case you're wondering why I look a little different today in this introduction and in the leadership wrap at the end of this video podcast, the main recording was completed prior to my current chemotherapy treatments and subsequent hair loss. As we navigate these tough challenges together, you and me, her insights are a constant reminder of Mandela's once famous quote, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. We warmly welcome my triumphant friend, Professor Shirley Zinn, and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. So Shirley, what a great honor. It's so wonderful to see you again, my friend, and really miss being with you in your beautiful home in Fishhook in South Africa. Just a warm welcome. So lovely to have you as part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Anne. I am so honored and humbled and excited to be part of this work, blown over by the fact that we can talk about leading boldly and reflect on Mandela's leadership lessons. And I love the background with beautiful Cambridge, where I spent four more years trundling through Harvard. So thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And you know, that's a wonderful place to begin. I know you began your early career in education. You went to the University of the Western Cape. You became a teacher. And of course, you went from the University of the Western Cape to Harvard, where you did not only, I think, a master's in education, but also your PhD. Can you share with us, perhaps a wonderful starting point, Shirley, is what has the role been of formal education in your life? Why is that so important? And even subsequent to that, I know that you've gone on, you've held many very senior positions in academia. So why this journey from the University of the Western Cape to Harvard, and then of course back to senior positions with the University of Pretoria, Cape Town, etc.?
And thank you so much. It's such a great starting point for this conversation. So I'll take you all the way back to my very first conversations as a young child, living on the Cape Flats, in very difficult socioeconomic circumstances, surrounded by poverty, unemployment, inequality, just every possible socioeconomic challenge that one can face around gangsterism, gender-based violence, very little hope, mountains of despair. And my dad started a conversation with my sister and myself. My sister's 3 years younger than I am. At a very early age, he was saying to me, please make something of yourself. Please do not get stuck in this place. And we know that this is all that we can offer you right now, but we also know that you have the potential to lift yourself up and do something quite different. And eventually I said to him, and he didn't use fancy words like vision and targets and all of that. They hadn't finished their high school. Both my parents had not finished high school, but they understood the importance of education somehow. And he said to me, all we're asking you is to complete your matric, just graduate from high school. You'll be able to find a decent job. And you know what the challenges are here.
What was the complexity? Just can you paint that picture a little more for us?
Yes, and so the Cape Flats is a spatial apartheid structure based on the group, based on the Group Areas Act, and is a key construct within the apartheid ecosystem. And my dad lived in a place called District 6. They were forcefully removed from District 6, and these spatial arrangements on the Cape Flats were to ensure that people of color were in places that were isolated, very, very poorly resourced. The houses, the frameworks were just not going to withstand the strong weather that came off the ocean. The grass doesn't grow in this place. And it's concrete blocks, miles and miles of concrete blocks with thousands, tens of thousands of people plugged into it. And they're not allowed to move from one area to the next without special documentation and permissions to go into certain places, and definitely not into white places. So it was a key part of the infrastructure and the design of cities and towns to keep people divided based on color lines. And so by the time I was born, and in 1961, these places were established and entrenched. And it is now 2021, it's 60 years later. It is in a much actually more difficult place because of our high unemployment in the country right now, and because of all the economic challenges that go with that. So it covers a few, probably a good few 100 kilometers, and it's a place where people are just jam-packed into an environment that can only lead to despair and hopelessness. And so for one to kind of unleash oneself from that, there needs to be something really special that is going to enable one to liberate oneself from that.
So how old were you when your dad had that conversation? And what was the kind of light bulb moment for you, Shirley?
I think, and I was probably about 6 years old, and I was in my first year of primary school, and he was telling me I needed to get to matric, which is 12 years later.
It's final year of high school, right?
Final year of high school, and a big milestone for especially girls coming from these areas where there's so much gender-based violence and teenage pregnancies and rape and all of the things that go with it. That it's a hard ask. It might sound, well, it's just high school, but it was a difficult thing to try and even just conceptualize that there would be a path for me out of that place.
So what was the aha moment? What shifted your mindset in from hopelessness and despair into yes, I can?
I think it was, in the conversations with my dad, and I'm going to come to the conversations with my mom because there were parallel conversations going on. He would say to me, he would say to us, we didn't finish our education, but we believe that if you continue to learn, you will have the ability to lift yourself up and extract yourself from this place, and find a better life for yourself and for those around you. And I think that was my aha moment. And that is why I come back to what Nelson Mandela said about education is the most important weapon you can use to change the world, because it is life-changing. And I'm living evidence of that. And so that was the aha moment. And that was when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. There was a little buzz that started in me that said, this is what you're going to have to do. This is going to be your journey. And I took it literally, quite literally. And when I speak to people now, I say, well, it doesn't necessarily have to result in a whole line of academic qualifications, but continuous learning is so empowering. It's so enriching. It's so uplifting. And it's so important for you to change your life and to change the lives of others around you. And in the spirit of our constitution, create a better life for all. I grasped that at a very young age and I ran with it. And for me, that was the light. That was the beacon that kept me going.
What were some of those action steps you took as a 6-year-old to make that light shine bright and make it a reality?
So I want to touch on what my mom used to do. My mom, was about values. Every day it was about, you have to respect people. You have to remain humble. You mustn't lose touch with who you are and where you've been at, even though your future can be very different from your past, and your past doesn't have to determine your future. And she didn't have fine language like that, but she had simple ways of saying this. She used to say, you have to work really, really hard, but you have to do it very well. She didn't use words like excellence and make excellence a habit, but she was essentially saying that because it's no good working hard if you're not doing it well. And she said, you don't have to be perfect either. Just do everything you do to the best of your ability. And perhaps one other thing I'll share with you is, be kind, be generous, live in service of other people. And if you do these things, you will have a better life than if you don't. So I think the vision messages, the values messages, the combination of the two gave me purpose. And that is the thing, these few messages that I got from both parents were the things that actually pushed me along. So when I got to primary school, it was, I was responsible for my younger sister. We tried to walk up a road to a school that was, it was hugely unsafe for young girls to be walking. And we had to go live with my grandmother for a couple of days in the week and come on weekends. And there again, I learned about discipline. I learned about determination and diligence and focusing on getting things done. And I'm grateful to my grandmother for her role as well, despite the fact we were very rebellious at the time. And then, of course, when I got to high school, there's a school called South Peninsula High, I was so excited when I finally got to matric. I always had worked hard and I'd always tried my very best to get the best academic results I could, bearing in mind what my mother told me about giving of your best and not being perfect. But I was not an A student. I was not, the lights were not like really shining bright here. It was just constant hard work for me. And when I got to matric, in the middle of my matric year, there were two teachers. They sat me down and they said to me, you know what? You're not the brightest pea in the pod academic-wise, but you have the potential to do much, much more than you think you're capable of doing. And I was kind of, wow, okay. So what is that you want me to do? And he said, well, just go home and have a conversation about university to your parents. Now, understand that university is not in our worldview, not in our framework. It's not something we understood. Nobody's been there before. But we did know it would cost money and take time. And so what I was told was by my parents, well, if your teachers think you can actually do this, and maybe you should try. But you'll still come home and do your chores in the afternoon, and you will get a weekend job, because here we have very little and every bit helps. So we were expecting you to go to work after high school. And so I went back the next day, and these teachers helped me to fill in my forms. I got a government bursary. And I ticked the box to be a teacher only because that resonated with me the most, and I had all of 5 minutes to think about it. But it was the beginning of, it was a 5-minute conversation with teachers, which I'm so grateful for, because it changed the trajectory of my life forever. And this is the power of education that I'm trying to share with people. And so, of course, I went to the University of the Western Cape. I did a BA and a higher diploma in education. I majored in English, Latin, and sociology. I was the only person in the Latin class.
That's an achievement. It's
oh, thank you.
not an easy language to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved the idea of studying, and I just enjoyed the explorations and the reading and the richness of it all. And then, of course, in 1980, we had this huge national uprising in education. And I was a student at the UWC campus, where, you know, it was a very big learning for me in terms of connecting the dots between the politics of the day, which is apartheid, education, my economic situation, and what a potential future could look like for a person like myself. And so, of course, became involved in student activism at the time. And of course, then the campus closed because there was just too much protestation. And my parents said, this is not what we signed up for. We're very sorry, but you must find a job. And so I canceled my bursary. I canceled my registration for my first year. And I went to look for a job. I went for a few interviews. A few months passed. I didn't get anything. And so by September of that year, I went back to the university to plead for them to undo my cancellations, to cancel my cancellations.
How you manage your parents in that equation?
Well, they saw that I tried to go for interviews. They saw that I'd made an effort, and I had to plead somehow with them as well to say, I really want to give this, a go. Can I go back? Is it actually okay? And I think that they saw the passion, and they saw, well, you didn't actually land the job. And that is so tough. And, so many people are unemployed in this country here. Imagine, picking yourself up from going literally door to door and finding nothing, and then having to go back with your tail between your legs to your parents to say, well, I haven't been successful with the job search. Maybe I need to go back to university, and I will be successful after that. So that was the big thing as well. And then the pressure was on, because now I couldn't disappoint them. I got their support again, and I managed the university to change their minds. And somehow it was a huge muddle. I think there were lots of students in my predicament at the time. And I was driven to finish, because this was a huge commitment, and it wasn't only about me, it was about my family. It was about the support that they'd given me, and I wasn't gonna disappoint. And so that was how I finished. When I finished higher diploma in education, postgraduate, I went, and as the government bursary is designed, you have to go and teach now for 4 years, because you had a 4-year bursary. So it was an amazing time. And in that 4 years that I was at the university, I was at the school, there was another huge uprising in education. And this time I was a teacher, and I was a custodian of children's lives and their safety and their well-being. And it taught me so many lessons. But that was a pivotal uprising in education for South Africa and its democratic future. It kind of really was a leapfrog moment for the country in its move to democracy. And I was very excited to be part of that as an educator. And while
Can
I
you
was
just
teaching,
tell us what
yes,
year that was and how you
that
felt at the
was,
time? This, you know.
yeah, that was 1985. I
Mm.
was in my second year of teaching. And obviously teachers had also formed solidarity groups around the cause and how we were going to protect our school and our children. And there were police coming onto the school grounds with batons to come and arrest children. And sometimes they didn't come to school. We had to find where they were. They hadn't gone home because they'd been arrested or been scared to move from wherever they were. And so for me, that was the guts and the gore of the horrors of apartheid and what that did to people in terms of anxiety and fear and just pain and incarceration being inflicted on people who were just trying to get an education, who were just trying to get on with their lives, and even under those difficult circumstances was still trying to thrive and grow. And for me, I had to work hard to contribute to this cause because it was not sustainable for us to continue in this unhumanitarian way, treating people in this way that those police were treating those children. And so I was very emotional during the time. I was very involved during the time. In fact, I got suspended from teaching during that time. There was a disciplinary inquiry because I was refusing to follow the Education Act. But fortunately, there were in Cape Town at the time probably about 79 other teachers who were taking the same stance. I was opposing, they were forcing us to do a final year exam when the children had not been to school for 3 months and had been chased from pillar to post and had been threatened and hurt and put into jail. And some of them were in hospital. Some of them couldn't go home. They were so afraid of just walking down the streets or even coming to school for that matter. So so we said, well, it's not right that people be subjected to a final exam. And the reason why they were forcing the final exam was it would bring some order, that they could control the situation again. The inspector literally sat at the school and said, you've got 3 or 4 hours to come and sign a form to say you will comply. If you don't comply, you'll be given a suspension letter. So that's what happened. So the suspension went on until end of 1987, by which time our 4 years, that required 4 years had lapsed. I had gone back to school in any case to continue to teach where I could. There was a lot of subversion that went on in that time because we just couldn't tolerate that sort of behavior. And as I said, it really gave you the underbelly of this horrible thing called apartheid in different ways. And it had to be opposed. And in everything we did, through our curriculum, through our teaching, through our work in the communities, that was, the thing that was kind of the overlay for everything that we did. I moved from the school to the University of the Western Cape to become a lecturer in education. So it's just interesting how all of that panned out. It was also in 1988 and that I met Kevin in January 1988 when I started my new job. Yes, exactly. Well, I'd always known him because he was a huge athlete, but at school, but I'd never kind of known him in that way. So 1988 was quite a pivotal year for me. I was at the University of the Western Cape. I was in the education faculty. I was there for 10 years in a lecturer's job, teaching, educating and licensing teachers to teach. And while I was there, I decided, well, I'm at a university now, I can do a master's. And I did a master's in adult education, in action research at the University of the Western Cape while I was lecturing. And Kevin's mom then one day, she used to clip, she still does, clips things from the newspaper in case I forget to read it. And she came home with this Harvard South Africa Fellowship now open for application, a small little ad in the newspaper. And I was blown away. She said to me, I think you need to have a look at this. And I said,
Yeah.
do you really think that I could ever go to Harvard?
Yeah.
And she said to me, well, if you don't apply, you will never know.
It's a very practical response.
Yeah. And she was just amazing in terms of sometimes other people believe in us before we believe in ourselves.
That's
And
so
that was
true.
such a huge thing for me to grasp. It was like, Harvard, my word. And to this day, and there are 5 people sent for the Harvard South African Fellowship every year from South Africa. Obviously, you have to get through all the hurdles to get into the specific programs.
Yes.
But they would support you financially for that particular period of the program.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I went for a very intimidating interview, and I didn't think I was going to make it. And I was so excited when I got the letter to say I've been successful. And myself, along with 4 others, we went. It was 1990. Went along to Harvard. I was at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I did a second master's. I just about finished the one and started the other. And what an amazing experience to be studying and living and being part of this bustling academic community. I loved the libraries. I loved Harvard Square. And I loved the intellectual challenge of just being there. I got into the doctorate of education. And I did my doctorate in anti-racist education. It was not easy to write because it was all of that experience that I had over all the years that got into this doctorate.
Bringing your South African experience of this very difficult, traumatic relationship between the apartheid government and the educational process in South Africa. Is that
That is correct? Yes, yes. It's all documented, and I graduated in 1997, but of course it was just post 1994 when our democratic dispensation was given birth to, and we had the wonderful leadership of Nelson Mandela there to take us forward, and it was exciting times. So all I wanted to do was to finish and come back and start to make a difference. And the interesting thing was when I finished the master's at Harvard, and I was in the process of the doctoral application, and I managed to get in. I went home and I sat down with Kevin one night and I said, "Wouldn't you like to come with me to Harvard?" And I was so worried that he would say no. But yeah, I mean, it's just such an amazing person. He said, "I'll go with you." So he gave up his job. He sold his motorbike. He sold his LPs. And he came on this unknown journey, into a foreign country with me. And I'm very, very grateful to him for that, because that was a very pivotal moment for us as well. And then we battled financially quite a bit. In my first year of my doctorate, I was trying to be a graduate assistant in different places. I was at the international office. I was a graduate assistant in the alumni office. And eventually I became a teaching fellow, and Harvard really helped. But I got to a point where I was so behind with my payments. I went, and this is where humility matters. You go to financial aid and you say, "I can't pay. I'm in trouble," And they said, "Yes, we can see that. And so what's your plan?" And I said, I think I have to go home. I don't think we can continue." And they looked at my results and they said to me, "You know what, if you produce results like this and you continue to do this, we are going to assist you. You're going to come here every 6 months. We're going to have a conversation about your performance and your results, and we'll support you in that way. We'll give you 3 teaching fellowships." And that was the way, and I was able to do the doctorate.
So they gave you the teaching fellowships that provided the income to pay for your time.
Yes, and they paid the tuition. So I got to work with 3 amazing professors on all their programs, and they paid my tuition, and I was able to actually finish. And if that wasn't enough, we gave birth to Jamie in 1995, smack bang in the middle of the doctorate. So I started in 93, graduated in 97, and I had Jamie in 1995. And that is why I have this huge emotional connect with Cambridge, with Harvard, because he was a Harvard baby.
He was a Harvard baby. And that has another pivotal, very traumatizing life lesson, Shirley. I know you wrote the best-selling book, swimming upstream, about your personal and professional journey. Is there something you want to share about, Jamie and the significance of him in your life?
Thank you, Anne. Yes, so swimming upstream is dedicated to Jamie and the life of Jamie. We were so excited to have our little boy. Everybody had seen me walking around Harvard and being pregnant and then having this baby, and we had so much support and so much love. And by the time I graduated and we went home, everybody here was so excited for us to come back. And we lost Jamie in a terrible car accident. He was seven years old. We had a wonderful Christmas with family here in Cape Town, and we were driving back to Johannesburg. It was the 3rd of January 2003 at 1:30 on a Friday, sunny Friday afternoon, and somebody just bumped us from behind, and we lost Jamie on the scene. I was touch and go for 24 hours. I didn't think I was going to live. They didn't know whether to tell me or not to tell me. And Kevin was very, very seriously injured and had to see to just about everything from then on out, because it was impossible for me to do anything. I had very serious injuries, and took a long time to recover. Of course, our hearts will always be broken, but without that 7 years of Jamie in our lives, for which I'm deeply grateful, our lives would have been very different. So I wrote the book just because he inspired me to continue the work that I was doing. And even though he was our only child and it was so devastating, I had to find a way to absolutely pull together my intellectual, my emotional, my social, my spiritual, all of those strengths, all of those quotients. I had to say to myself, Shirley, you're going to have to pull yourself up out of this, because you need to move forward. There's work to be done. There's a reason why all of this had to happen in the way that it did. And you are here for a purpose. And I learned that I needed to live my life with purpose and meaning in a far more deliberate way, perhaps, than I had until then. And so for me, that devastation and that loss and that grief took me to a special place where I felt I want to make a difference in the lives of as many children and as people as I possibly can, through education, through the story, through the journey. And if I can inspire just one person every day, it would have made all of this worth it.
Absolutely. And just such a moving story, Shirley. What was your aha moment in that very dark place, and in pulling yourself together and moving forward? What were the steps that you took that helped you pivot out of that despair?
And I cannot describe the depth. And grief it's real, it's raw, it's painful, and one never thinks that things like this can happen to you, and so I use the story also to encourage everybody who has suffered grief, who has suffered loss, who has been very ill and worried about their own mortality, to say that we need to support each other. We need to care for each other a little bit more. We need to show a little more empathy, a little more generosity, a little more kindness. And those people who were around us that I talked about earlier, that uplift and inspire us, those are the people we must deliberately surround ourselves with. Not only when we're going through a crisis, but we must be more deliberate in our efforts to spend time with those kind of people that will take us forward. Of course, as we know, with emotional well-being matters, we need to seek help. We first of all need to understand that we need.
Is this what you
help.
did, Shirley? Is this what you did at that time? So you
This is exactly
surrounded yourself with your family, your parents, were there your former teachers? Can you take us through specifically what you did in that moment that helped you move beyond that depth of despair? Who were the people you surrounded yourself with?
Well, those are the people that you just mentioned, and so those were my parents, who were also devastated themselves. My sister, Kevin, the extended family, very good friends. I have best friends from primary school days that I'm still connected with today. They all just rallied and supported me. But there are the quiet moments, there are the dark and the deep moments when you can really go down a slippery slope. And I reflected on my journey. I reflected on the hard work. I reflected on Harvard and all the opportunity I had. I reflected also on, I studied a lot of psychology. I can do this. I can, go to work sooner than I should. That was the other thing I did. I went to work sooner than I should. I realized that a few weeks in was a very bad idea to do that. But we had empathetic people at work as well. And so I got to a point where I realized that my understanding of psychology is quite different when you got to work on yourself and your own inner dynamics and your what goes on in your soul and in the depths of your heart when you are in this kind of despair. And I realized that here is where I need to get help because I cannot do this on my own. So Kevin and I, we went for some counseling sessions. And I think after the third or so session, I realized you need to pull yourself up out of this as well. And so while you have all of these wonderful people around you, inside of yourself, you have to find the strength, the resilience, the courage to say, I'm not going to go down too deep, because the deeper you go, the more difficult it is to get out. And it's easy to slide in. It's very easy because this is so devastating. But I managed to say I will lift myself up, and you know what it is. It's every day, because every day I think about Jamie. I wonder what he would have been like. I miss him. I'm a little bit heart sore, and then like I did today, I went to a school. I spoke to some school children today, and I just felt so uplifted. I felt that if I could have just planted a seed in one person to say, you might be in a difficult place now, but you've got so much potential and so much to go, so much ahead of you. That has been incredibly fulfilling for me. So it's the combination of the people, it's the combination of your own internal work that you need to do. And it's being intentional. You have to be intentional in lifting yourself up every day and doing the things that will continue to fulfill you. I think that is what's really important in all of this, because sometimes you can get caught up in the routines. Like I tried to go back to work. I thought maybe that would be a gap filler of some sort, but it doesn't work. It's not sustainable, not until you've dealt with it. So and so sometimes it's quite tough to get up onto platforms like I did today and try to dissect the blow by blow. And like I'm talking to you now, sometimes I really battle with that. But also willing to share it for what it might mean to another person in terms of, okay, so you've been there and you're living proof that there is a way to navigate every day and to still, still be not necessarily successful, but enabled to do what you need to do.
Absolutely. And that's very powerful. And I'm listening to you, Shirley. It also sounds that there were very clear actions you took. So sometimes stepping out of this moment of despair and going through that internal process, but it's also about then taking action that will move you forward. What were the specific actions that will help people say, okay, so what should I do now?
So, Anne, I remember a very specific part of that journey was I was the group head, I was the regional head of Ricket Benkiza for Africa, Middle East. It involved plenty of travel. I had group
human resources, right? That was
in human resource management. So I had HR heads in each of the countries, and I had to visit there, and I had to, it was quite a lot of work to do in country. And this one day after the accident had happened, about 2 months later, I was in a hotel in Dubai, which was part of the big hub as well. And I just realized that I haven't dealt with what was really the big elephant in the room for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my despair and my being gutted, really having my, my soul wrenched. So I decided that I was going to go back and ask if I could resign and just rethink, reset myself. And it was a big step because Records was very, very empathetic, and they said, no, you still got tons of leave left, take your leave and and recover. And I said, I don't want to be doing this long distance travel, and I need to be anchored in South Africa, near my family, near my friends, and I need the time out. So and they understood that, and they supported me enormously through that. So I took off about 4 months, and I set up Shirley Zinn Consulting in 2003. I thought I'll start with small projects. I'd lost my confidence. I'd lost my sense of self-belief. I didn't know what I could and couldn't do. And so the emotional intensity was tough. What I thought I would do was I would come back to Harvard, and I bought a ticket. Kevin didn't do this journey with me. I did it on my own. I stayed in Harvard for about 2 weeks. I went to the hospital where I gave birth, Brigham and Women's Hospital. I walked around the streets of Cambridge, and I went to Boston to the shops I like to go to, and ate in the places that we like to eat, and met the professors that were so curious and so concerned and so just wanting to support. And by the time the 2 weeks was done, I was ready to come home, and I felt like a whole different person. Wow. I felt like I've got the strength now to put one foot in front of the other again. And so I landed a few projects with Shirley Zinn Consulting. I did a few odd pieces of work here and there, and suddenly I got a call from a search firm that said that the South African Revenue Services is in search of a head of HR. They've already interviewed lots of people. They're down to their last, cycle around the candidate pool, and they would like to meet you. And I was, oh my word, I could never, ever present myself, in this wounded and broken state to a job like this. I can't do it. And they said, come and do it. Come and do it. It will help you if you did it. And then, of course, I met Pravin Gordon, who was the commissioner
of South African Revenue Services, who went on to become Minister of Finance.
That is correct. And I was just blown away by the vision, by the commitment to the country, by the importance and necessity to be a good citizen and be paying your taxes, but also to be a good tax collector, and what it will take to transform this entity into modernized tax collection center that would be able to collect the money that we need from taxpayers through good systems, processes, and people, and just that vision of we have to change South Africa and make people really want to pay their taxes, because they know that that's going to really, change the way South Africa was prior to apartheid. And the proposition was
changing the mindset of South African citizens about not only their duty and obligation, but the contribution they were making by paying their taxes.
Absolutely. Because before, people would not want to pay their taxes to the apartheid regime. And now we had to go out on road shows into communities, into schools, into hospitals, and we had to show SARS staff, this is when you collect taxes, these are the things that are going to work better. And we had to change the mindset of South African citizens to say, you have to pay your taxes, and this is why. And it was just amazing to be part of a story and a journey like that. And it was a ton of work. And Pravin Gordon was very focused, on task, on time, delivery, execution, find the right talent for this organization. And it was an
And
amazing
built
time.
the integrity of the South
Yeah.
African Revenue Services in terms of some of those. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, it just struck me because, I recall so well how there were very strict disciplined rules that nobody at the South African Revenue Services could accept any gift, no matter how big or how small. So interesting about the discipline inside the organization from a people and mindset point of view as well.
No, absolutely. And it's and with all my hesitancy and my challenges going into it, I was so taken up by the ability, by the energy of what we were trying to do here and the difference
Yeah.
that I could make if we could get this right. It's pivotal in our environment to get this right. The tax agency has to work, and it has to be efficient, and it has to be credible. And so it was just wonderful to be in that space. And I very soon shifted my focus from my own, issues to I'm actually here to help to make this difference. And that became a purpose in a way. And it is wonderful when your personal purpose and your professional purpose start to converge.
Shirley, it's such an interesting example. And, I mean, you've made this incredible pivot from education into the business world, with South African Revenue Services, which, as we know, is a public entity. And of course, then you went on to the private sector. But just staying with SARS or South African Revenue Services for a moment, tax collection is very much a sort of left brain, it's a numbers game, it's logic, it's about money and finance and accounting and paying your dues. Can you just briefly share with us, from a leadership point of view, clearly the transformation that Praveen Gordhan was leading and you were a big part of, in terms of, head of the human capital side of the organization. What were the other aspects of leadership intelligence types? I mean, there's the functional technical challenge of collecting the money and making sure that it's accurate and correct and stuff. But then there's also changing the hearts and minds of people about being willing to pay their taxes and doing so efficiently, and changing the South African perception of this organization that typically people didn't feel that warm and friendly towards. What were some of the other leadership, are there one or two other leadership competencies, whether it be, the emotional intelligence, the cultural intelligence? I mean, South Africa, and perhaps the cultural intelligence is quite an interesting one because, as we know, the legacies of apartheid, a lot of people didn't want to pay their taxes. And now you had to broaden this tax base. What are some of the other leadership competencies? Can you just help us unpack that just a little?
I think, Anne, you've hit on a very important point here. So yes, there was the technical side. And then there was the systems and what technology and modernization we needed to do. And you'll recall that's when the electronic submissions of your tax returns and e-filing, and that was where all of that was given birth to. But we also needed new skills on board in order to be able to do that. We needed technical skills, we needed the IT and those sorts of technical skills. And then we needed the leadership who could change the hearts and minds as well. And those are not all separate. I think it's all integrated. So the big ask from a human capital point of view is to find us those sorts of leaders. Fortunately, there's the SARS Act, which is a little bit different from the Public Service Act. And that allowed us to find people from corporates, to find people from, the big four like PwC, Deloitte, etc. We could attract people like that, even if it was for a year or two. It was attractive for them to spend their time there and not only contribute, but also when they leave, they take whatever they learned back and they say, okay, all right, this is what we need to be doing differently. And they tell the narrative has actually changed quite fundamentally. And so the leadership that SARS needed at the time was really to say, big change management. What happened in the past is past, and we're into a different kind of future, and we have a democratic South Africa, and we are going to ensure that the grudge payment of tax is going to become a payment that people really believe is something that they must do in order to create a better life for all. And we had in the leadership of Mandela at the time as well, all of those things coming together to say we need humane leadership. We need leadership that is in service of others. We need bold and courageous leadership. We need ethical leadership, and we need people who have a sense of values and social justice and can bring peace and stability to the country. And so those are the kinds of people we tried to find, and the technical skills were a given. You needed to have that, but those are the other things that we were looking for to ensure that we could build this public entity into a well-oiled, well-respected, properly orchestrated and respected professional environment, which is what we were actually able to achieve, and in a very short time as well. Because there was a huge program management map, and there were so many streams of work that were going on and converging as we worked with under Praveen's leadership to make sure that we got to the vision of what SARS was really all about. And SARS was at your service then. A very different approach to what it was.
A service organization, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just if you can briefly share, Shirley, how did you manage to attract these high-powered, fast-moving private sector, professionals and executives that came out of these big international accounting firms? What was the big carrot? What was the motivation? How did you bring them in?
Well, and of course, we couldn't pay the big salaries that, the big four can pay, or the banks can pay, or other financial services, big asset managers. We couldn't pay that kind of money. But what we were offering was a second to none experience in a place that was transforming for the betterment of the country and all its people. And that was really the proposition, to be part of something amazing that was evolving here. And that was key to our building our democracy and developing, the economy in a way that was inclusive. And so all of those elements were more qualitative elements, perhaps, that drew people to an organization that was in high change, that was pivotal, and where whatever we did, the bar was so low, you could make a huge difference. And I think that was an exciting place for people. They would forgo some of their salary that they were earning in order just to have that experience and to make that contribution. And it was an exciting time. They would come for a year or two, even just to be part of that energizing
and that
shift and that transformation and that cultural shift. And to do an organizational culture shift is one thing, but to do a national culture shift is another thing. And and that was what was required here. And this little engineer could be a key part in the bigger ecosystem to drive our country to a better place.
And to that point, Shirley, I mean, as you said, you were doing the transformation within the South African Revenue Services internally, but it was also changing the mindset of the nation. So are there kind of few action items that helped you pivot out of this old perception of revenue services into this new? What were the sort of key takeaways in terms of what you were doing to change the minds of the nation? You know, I know you went on roadshows, you know, you were speaking to people, but were there particular communities you were targeting? Were there particular types of events you were doing?
I think, and we try to infuse this thinking and the shift in everything that we did. So whether it was, you know, changing the logo, which we did change, to changing the strap line, we put up the, you know, the notices, how we put up the notices, of, you know, the timelines, the communication, the people on the ground. It was a bottom up, top down shift. There was a lot of retraining that went on. There was you know, a redefining of what a branch is and what it does and what the layout is. It was simple things like meters and greeters. There was training, because you couldn't just know about value added tax. You also needed to be able to know what pay as you earn was and what all the other taxes were. And the systems were, you not open up one at a time. You could see the holistic picture of a taxpayer, with a single view of the taxpayer. You could see everything in one go, but you needed to know more than you knew before. So you needed to be reskilled, and there were training programs that we had to put in place, and people needed to come, and we repositioned some of the branches in better places, and we tidied them up, and we made the infrastructure more welcoming and more and more customer orientated and more you know, efficient, so you didn't have to stand in long queues and have debate and be sent from pillar to post to get your queries sorted out. And we were online, and long before anybody else was online, we were online and doing these things. So so there were those interventions, and then of course there were you know, discussions and meetings with key stakeholders, something that was very important as well, with business, with communities, with NPOs, to just get a groundswell of people to understand that this is what we are doing, this is why we are doing it, and this is what we're hoping to achieve, and how important this is. And so yes, it takes a while. I mean, I think we pretty much slipped back into a place where people say, well, I don't know why I have to pay my taxes, but I think that the large majority of us who do pay without feeling the grudge, we know that if this money is channeled in the way that it should be channeled, we will see upliftment of society and communities, and we will see a humming economy that is inclusive of all. So, and we will see more equity and all of those important things that this country actually needs. And I think that is very compelling, because you don't get to work in places where you can be part of an organization that can have such huge impact. And I think that those are some of the more exciting things we did. And of course, when we went and we did our, you know, our budgets at Parliament, it was an exciting day. Everybody was there, and we were waiting to hear what, you know, what the commissioner was going to say, what the Minister of Finance was going to say. It was wonderful times, and those were some of the best moments for me in our journey also towards democracy. So it was really wonderful and a privilege, you know, to be part of that.
And of course, you went on to do phenomenal things, serving on private sector boards, listed, unlisted. I mean, you've gone on to another whole kind of stage of your career. But you know, you made the point, Shirley, which was quite interesting, how you stepped into revenue services at a very difficult time. But of course, there was also this energy around the country, and you know, the impact of Nelson Mandela on the country. Can you take us back to a moment in time, a specific moment and setting, which was a significant Mandela moment for you?
And the leadership of Mandela there are so many aspects to it, and it's so difficult to pin the one thing down. But for me, the Mandela moment was really, I think we were actually in Boston at the time of the vote, and we had a special day that we could go and do that.
That was April 1994 for the first democratic elections, right?
Yes. And I'll never forget how emotional that moment was, because it's what we've been struggling for, all our lives. For those of us who were oppressed under apartheid in South Africa, it was such an important day, and we went there, and I really was.
Where did you go in Boston?
It was in Boston. I think it was the one of the state buildings. I remember there's a huge staircase, and we were in the queue. We were going to vote, and there were mostly students, and some expats that special privilege was given to go into this place. And I remember after that, Harvard had an event at the Kennedy School of Government to celebrate South Africa, and it was just such an uplifting moment, full of hope and peace and opportunity and joy, and this whole we can change the world feeling. If we could have done this, anybody can do this. And I think that I was just blown over in that moment, that finally we could have a better life for all. And there was just nothing that would have stopped me from being so proud of our country in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And how often has that moment, Shirley, been a moment you could reignite with in times of challenge? And we go through these cycles in life. How often has that moment re-energized you?
I really want to remind people of where we were in that moment in 1994, and that we should really try to lead like Mandela. And I know that that's a specific project, so that's not my own concept, but I think we want to bring peace, we want to bring growth, we want to bring stability, we want to see social justice in our time, as we always said. And as Mandela said, it's within each one of us to do this. And so I want to always remind, wherever I am, I want to remind leadership, I want to remind HR professionals, I want to remind boards, let's not forget where we were and the journey that we have been through. And that when we talk about inclusion and end of inequality and poverty and discrimination, and when we talk about, a future where there's trust, that, is where we can rise above our circumstances, where we can fall over and have the courage and boldness to get up again. And when we see the many mountains, as Mandela said, and we know we're going to have to continue to move forward, and that this was never going to be an easy journey. So we know in a recovery like this, it's going to take time. It's like people are saying, we're still a fledgling democracy. We have a lot to learn. We'll probably go backwards and forwards a few times. We need to be patient with each other, but we cannot tolerate unethical behavior. We cannot tolerate corruption. And we need to root that out. And so for me, I would just love to see that servant leadership, that dialogue, that engagement to solve the world's problems, to solve the nation's problems, to instill some fortitude and selflessness, and put people at the center of doing what is right. If we can achieve that, I think Mandela would be smiling down on us right now. I think he would be smiling down on us if we were able to get ourselves back on that original track. I think we have tripped over each other a little bit in this process, and I think that we need a future that is meaningful, especially Madiba loved youth and children. And for me, that is very dear to my heart, given what has happened to my own child. And so we need to continue to work on a better life for all. We need to leave this world a better place, if not for ourselves and for our children. And I think that that's what you would have wanted to see, and that we mustn't lose sight of that, and we must continue to be inspired and led by that light he talked about of, allowing the shine, so that, we give other people permission as well to have their lights shine in perhaps a dark time. And I remain actively optimistic, and that we are able to move our way, work our way through some of our challenges, and move forward despite the huge obstacles that we face.
South Africa, as you say, and not only South Africa, many nations in the world that, even right now in the United States of America, I mean, the level of conflict and deep divides. If Mandela was sitting in your boardroom as chair of one of your boards, as chair of the board, what would be that honest conversation that Mandela would be expressing to the leaders of that boardroom, not only on the boards you sit on, but the rest of corporate South Africa and other boardrooms of privileged, successful companies around the world?
That's a great question. And I think that we have to deeply reflect on what is the business of business. Mm-hmm. And I think Mandela would have, before we even started to talk about social justice and social impact and non-financials versus financial measures and KPIs and metrics on environment and sustainability, on good governance, I think you would have made all of that compulsory long ago already if he was here. Those elements would have all been part of what we would be held accountable to as leaders, and he would have made that abundantly clear right from the start. I think we're only edging into that space now.
Are you talking about the triple bottom line? So not only the numbers, but social, environmental, triple bottom line. Yeah.
That is correct. We would have had people, planet, profit long ago already, and he would have made sure that every organization in this country, public or private, be held accountable for all of those elements, because I think we've become very profit focused, and we've forgotten and somehow also eroded all of the other elements that are around people and planet and environment and children and social justice and inclusion and all of those important things. So for me, I think he would be sitting at the helm of the table and saying, let's make sure that every decision we take here at this board table encompasses that.
What do you think he would say to the youth?
I think he would say to the youth that you need to continue to learn, that education is the most important weapon with which to change the world. Please go to school, please get your education, and we will make sure that the economy is open so that you can find a job, that you can live a fruitful and meaningful and thriving life. I think he would say to the youth, there are, and that you can also play your role in shaping and influencing the direction and future of this country.
Wow. So why do you think his leadership is still relevant today?
I think it's incredibly relevant today because there is a whole lot of unfinished business on that agenda that is set for us in 1994. We have not stepped up to that in a way that I think that he was hoping that we could. And I went when he was lying in state in Pretoria at the Union buildings, and I managed to get into the queue despite the throngs of people. And I just wanted to catch a last glimpse to say that whatever I do, I want to try and contribute to finishing or extending what you've started. I really almost wanted to say that to him in person. And I was very fortunate I was just there for a second, literally. But what a moment that was for me as well. It was incredibly emotional for me just to get myself there. And that was part of the conversation that I was having within myself as I stood in that queue to see him, was to say, I want to continue this work. And I think that if every South African leader can go back and revisit the teachings and the vision, and everybody can get behind the single vision for a better life for all in South Africa, we will lead differently. We will lead like Mandela.
Mm-hmm. And what about a better life for all, for every human citizen on this planet,
Absolutely. You can extend it for sure.
So that's very moving, Shirley. Just shifting tack a little on a perhaps light, on a lighter note, what is the one thing people don't know a lot about you that you really like about yourself?
I love to dance.
You love to
I
dance.
love, I love rhythm. I love flow. I love being outdoors. I
What
love
kind of
being in
dancing?
nature.
What kind of
Well,
dancing?
I've done everything from ballet to Latin to contemporary jazz to
Yeah.
gymnastics. I've always loved dance, and I don't think too many people know that.
And what is it about dance? What is it
I just
about
love the
the,
movement. I love the energy.
yeah,
And I like the music and the flow that you know, that the energy that flows through you when you're in your movement, and it kind of shifts your brain in a little bit from, you know, all the academic stuff. When I'm doing that, I'm feeling this release, you know, and coming out of me. So I think yeah, I can just do freestyle and I can feel so uplifted, you know, when I've done that.
so here's an unexpected question. Do you think we should bring more dance into the workplace and corporate?
Yeah, I think one of our colleagues wrote a book called Dancing in the Boardroom. I
Yeah,
thought that's a fantastic,
yeah,
Nolita Kude's book. I thought that
yes,
was a fantastic way to put it. Really
yeah,
great. I think,
yeah,
you know, dance is about flow and connectedness and fluidity and energy, you know, and it's all the things that I think we need in these staid, old, traditional, you know, places like boardrooms.
yeah. Well, perhaps that should be on your board agenda too, you know. Um, what is, I know that you and Kevin run half marathons. What is it about running half marathons and that kind of physical discipline that means the most to you?
Kevin put me on the road almost 10 years ago, and I was always I was a sprinter. I did 100 and 200 meters at school events back in the day. I never thought I would be able to do a half marathon. That's one of those, you know, the impossible is possible moments as well, was when you put
Yeah,
me out there. And for me, that was also, you know, being out, you know, on the streets of Cape Town, well, even in Johannesburg when we were doing some of these things. And just enjoying the beauty around us, and you know, and all of these people. And I think it also about really the ability to reflect differently when you're running, and you are, you know, putting one foot in front of the other, sometimes wondering, why am I doing this? Sometimes feeling this is absolutely amazing, I'm going to do the next one. And I think there's a lot of relief also that comes, you know, through and healing that comes with a little bit of physical exertion. And this is also part of what I'm trying to tell people. We don't all have to be doing the marathon running, but a little walk every day can
yeah,
change, you know, your whole mindset in terms of your overall well-being and your experience and your mood and your, you know, your emotional state. So for me, that is an unlock, unleash moment.
okay, okay. And one other fun fact, I mean, we know Cape Town. In fact, I think it was in 2014, Cape Town was voted the most beautiful city in the world. And of course, as you know, it's one of my favorite cities in the world, place of great healing for me, actually, post my cancer surgery. But I was curious to know from your perspective, what is your happiest place in Cape Town and why?
I think my happiest place in Cape Town is just being here on this Fish Beach. That's why we came back here. Remember, Fish was also off limits to people of color. We could never come here.
Yeah,
And as soon as it opened, my mother used to just put her feet in the water, and she just loved to walk on the beach. And then when Jamie came back home, she used to bring Jamie to the beach, and he loved the beach so much. So there's this emotional thing. And so just being on Fisher Beach
yes,
is one of
yes,
the most amazing places and Cape Town has many amazing places, and this is just a basic village, really, if you like.
yes.
It's a small fishing village in the big scheme. There's no real big glitz and glam, um, but I just love the villagey feeling and the beach, and just you know, watching the waves. I just love that.
Yeah. And I so remember us meeting on Fishhook Beach, Shirley, going back in time and just having a wonderful lunch. But of course, also going down to the marvelous harbour where all the fishermen come in and sell their fresh catch of the day. And, yeah, I can understand why and such a beautiful place. I think in our kind of final moments together, what are the key takeaways? What should people who really care, our generation and the next, who care about being bold, being courageous, and taking on these big, large challenges in helping the world navigate this very turbulent time? What would you say?
I would encourage everybody to read the books and the writings of Nelson Mandela. I think we don't read enough, and we haven't processed it enough, and we haven't reinforced these messages enough. And we are getting caught up in the negativity of the moment, and we've forgotten that we have this icon here that has laid out so many pearls of wisdom to us, and that it is within ourselves. As you said, the mind and the heart, and now I'm paraphrasing, is a formidable combination. If we can only just go back and remind ourselves of those lessons that he taught, and I've got all my own little things that I try to remind myself of every day, about the things that Nelson Mandela said. And one of the things is everyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve success if they are dedicated and passionate about what they do. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. These are some of the pearls that keep me going, and I believe can keep this nation and maybe even the world, alive. And maybe finally, I'm fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun and one's feet moving forward. Isn't that just beautiful, beautiful, simple language that we can all understand and buy into?
Absolutely, Shirley. Well, on that note, thank you for keeping your wonderful spirit facing towards the sun and stepping, remarkable steps one in front of the other. You're a great inspiration. It's such a privilege to call you a friend, a mentor, and a colleague, and inwards, onwards, and upwards. But bless you, thank you. Keep up your wonderful work in the world.
Thank you so much, Anne, for having me. It's been a real honor to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Today's leadership wrap energizes my mind and stirs my heart. I was so excited to recently see my dear friend, Professor Shirley Zinn, and her wonderful husband, Kevin, who unexpectedly came to visit at Harvard University. Once again, we could break bread, catch up in person, and I could give a hug to a remarkable woman I deeply love, admire, and respect. For Shirley and Kevin, Harvard is a kaleidoscope of grief, loss, and rugged resilience. Their only child, Jamie, was a Harvard baby and tragically passed away in a fatal car crash at age 7 on January the 3rd, 2003. An accident that left Shirley battling to live and Kevin with multiple severe injuries. So what happens when life sends us an unexpected curveball, a big life shock, or a bittersweet lemon? How do we ruggedly rise? The bottom line, my friends, there is no easy way up. We need to stop glossing over the grit. There is a whole messy process in order to rise. Brené Brown, in her best-selling book, Rising Strong, or what I call Rugged Resilience, outlines 3 bold steps: the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. In the reckoning, we walk into our story. We reckon with our difficult emotions. We identify them. We own them. rather than numbing them out. We get curious about the relationship between our thoughts and actions and the different emotions it triggers. For example, if we think our life is over, we feel despair. If we think our life matters more than ever, we feel a heightened sense of urgency to live with deeper meaning. In the rumble, we own our story. After a shitty first draft, we revisit our version of the truth. What is true? What is false? What is the don't know? And what is our part in this current trauma and emotional mess? We dig beneath the surface and come to terms with deeply buried emotions like blame and shame and resentment and the need for forgiveness. Noticing and truth-telling is where our transformation begins. We learn, we grow, and we become whole. In the revolution, we get to rewrite the end of our story. The reckoning and the rumble empower us to radically change our thoughts and beliefs. Based on what we learn, we get to rewrite the script of the end of our story in a more courageous way that changes the way we engage with the world and in turn changes the way the world engages with us. It shifts the way we live, we love, and we lead. Professor Shirley Zinn got back up again and again and again with rugged resilience. She reckoned, she rumbled, and she rewrote the end of her childhood story and the end of the story of that fatal car accident. It fundamentally changed the way she shows up in life and love and in the boardroom every day. When we deny our stories, they define us. But when we own our stories, we become integrated, at peace, and whole. And we get to rewrite the end of our story. So until next time, take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.